So not too long ago on the channel, we discussed an interesting anti-piracy technology that was spotted as part of Sonic Frontier's planned Steam release, and I did some research on this technology at the time because PC gamers do not like this. However, it seemed like a PC confined thing, so I didn't look into it any further. To my surprise today, this technology is making its way potentially to major Nintendo Switch titles going forward, and we have to break down all the details and discuss the implications on whether or not this affects the end user experience for Nintendo Switch games going forward. What's up, nation? If it's your first time on the channel, make sure you join Sunbro Nation by subscribing below, hit the like button on this video if you enjoy it today, and make sure you turn on your bell notification icon so you're kept up to date with all the newest gaming news. Now, as I mentioned, guys, we are just unpacking one major story today, and this one is going to be an interesting conversation to have because it has to do with an anti-piracy DRM style technology known as Denuvo that you may remember we discussed briefly on the channel before when it was spotted as part of Sonic Frontier's game files that would be running on Steam. And to my surprise, there was a very harsh reaction to this technology being included as part of Sonic Frontiers because, unfortunately, while this technology does aim to help companies ensure that people are not pirating their games, which it absolutely should not do, it has some serious downsides, like constantly being required to be checked in online, meaning you have to play online in order to play your game legally. That is not necessarily confirmed to be part of the Switch, but we will go over all those details here shortly. That's one downside. The other downside to the technology that people have noticed is that things like frame rates and load times, and while the intention of the tech is to help developers and companies stay profitable, not have people rip off their games without paying for them, of course that is a good intention to have. However, the bad downside of how this technology is designed is it is a resource hog, and it absolutely does affect performance, as there's numerous videos on the web, one of which I will link to that'll have some side-by-side comparison on screen that does a really good job not only highlighting the exact difference in load time on numerous PC games, and keep in mind these are powerful PCs that are noticing these noticeable gaps, like your load time went from something like 15 seconds to 30 seconds plus with this Denuvo technology attached to it. And that's the kind of discrepancy we're talking about in some cases when you're talking about a high-end PC running it. We have to imagine what this means when it hits something like a Tegra X1 chip that has been around since 2015 and sold in the Switch on 2017. Like, yeah, we could be looking at some negative implications from this technology being utilized. And the question really will become, what will Nintendo do and how much will they prioritize having this technology intact versus the overall quality and experience of the game? And I do have faith that Nintendo won't just go on some path where we're getting all of the first party Nintendo releases running sub 30 frames per second and having crazy long load times. I don't think it's all bleak here, but it definitely is a situation that's worth paying attention to. And to get on the same page with exactly what's been spotted around this online and some high level highlights from this announcement, let's quickly hop over to Nintendo Everything and read through their detailed typed up article together. Denuvo launches first Switch emulator protection. Denuvo by Erdito, I don't know if that's how you say it, I'm gonna go with that, known for its anti-tampering and digital rights management protection on PC, has now announced that it is introducing a revolutionary technology to protect games launching on Nintendo Switch from piracy. Today's announcement notes that any Switch title can be emulated from day one and played on PC, bypassing the strong protections offered on the PC version. But with the Nintendo Switch emulator protection, it's claimed that anyone wishing to play the game has to buy a legitimate copy. Erdito said its solution, as with all other Denuvo solutions, the technology integrates seamlessly into the build toolchain with no impact on gaming experience. It then allows for insertion of checks into the code, which blocks gameplay on emulators. We at Denuvo understand that piracy negatively affects the gaming industry and are working with industry parties to ensure they have the latest protection technologies available for them, said Reinhard Blakosevich. I'm sure that's wrong. I'm going with Spopovich from Dragon Ball Z, managing director at Denuvo by Erdito. Our team is excited to provide a solution that helps the developers and publishers to help fight the issue of Nintendo Switch piracy. So listen, with this particular story, there's a lot of different aspects to pay attention to because yes, on one hand, there is some downside potentially to the performance side of things that we will dive into to for Switch games. The upside to it obviously is Nintendo Switch does clearly have a problem with whenever a retail game starts to get shipped to stores. One thing that will happen is that game will get sold online, picked up probably just by a rogue employee, decides to put it out on the internet, and then everybody can illegally pirate that game and play through to its completion on an emulator on a PC and actually have a better frame rate, higher resolution experience than the Switch is able to run. And you do see things like early endgame spoilers talked about and being passed around online, sometimes a full week or two before the game actually is officially released on retail shelves. And so I definitely acknowledge that that is a major issue, and Nintendo should be taking steps to fight that being so easily and readily available. Totally understand that aspect. The downside to things is with this particular technology, even though they are claiming that it has no impact on the gaming experience, it clearly does, and there's just too much overwhelming evidence around this tech that ties it to things like poor frame rate, poor load times, larger file sizes, and you can even see the same games as some developers go in and ultimately remove Denuvo after their new game has been available for quite some time, and you actually do see better performance boosts. And that's how a lot of these comparison videos that you can find online spotted the data. It's the same copy of the same game, and it just straight up runs worse when Denuvo is enabled. And so I personally am pretty worried about this coming to Switch games. Like, as I mentioned, we don't know how Nintendo will implement this technology entirely. If it is just something as simple as basically a code check that makes it more complicated for the games to run on emulators, okay, that is what it is. Although I will personally say, while legally purchasing games, I am a fan of emulation. If you went out and you supported the developers with your money and you own that game, and there are ways to dump that file to a PC, I think that that is okay to enhance the game and have it around for years and years to come. And especially when you talk about game preservation 10, 20 years down the line, as we're seeing things already like the Wii U and 3DS eShops totally being dismantled and discontinued for new purchases. All of the new gamers growing up are literally going to have an entire chunk of games wiped from history and not really able to go in and enjoy those titles anymore on any simple way to do so other than tactics to allow you to emulate them and play them on PCs. So I've personally never been against emulation and have personally enjoyed it in many aspects of maintaining a classic retro library of game collection that are readily and easily available and to play and enjoy, looking even better than ever on the PC. I'm a fan of stuff like that. I just make sure I actually have the legal owned copies of the games as well. Now, in response to this news, of course, the major Switch emulator that is available on the PC actually sent out a tweet regarding this, saying that regarding Erdito's Denuvo announcement, we will continue developing an emulation platform for Switch game preservation and enhancement upon which consumers may enjoy their games both now and beyond the lifecycle of the console itself. Now, so at this point in time, it's definitely going to be a wait and see scenario with how heavily this is implemented into Switch games. I don't see it being something like a constant online check system. That would be absolutely catastrophic for physical game collectors that just want to be able to have their games physically, and whether they're near online connections or not, be able to play your games. That's actually scarily something that does happen to other systems now, where you have games like Gran Turismo 7 and even all of your downloaded Xbox Series games at one point in time were like unplayable because the system couldn't talk to the server. Like, excuse me, if I bought my physical copy of a game, especially growing up in the era where that was the only option, it makes no sense to be able to say you physically bought this copy of this game, but we couldn't talk to our online servers, so we can't verify it's real, hence you can't play your game. And you know, that is going to definitely be a big downside as gaming is headed towards that all digital future. I'm hopeful that we will always have companies around like Limited Run, that just recently got acquired, by the way, but you know, maybe there will always be that market for physical games, but you definitely can't argue that the revenue that can be made on the digital front and just the convenience factor of kids growing up today just downloading the games, not ever having to leave their homes. And I'll be honest with you, it is more convenient. I enjoy myself some games I have downloaded digitally. I'm like, oh, I don't got to go look for the cartridge. I'm just able to boot this up right away and switch between the library of digital games super easy. I get the convenience. The problem is if you ever want to look back to your retro nostalgia ages 10 years, 20 years in the future, you might not be able to boot up those games and have access to them at all if servers are shut down and things don't work right anymore. And that's where emulation comes into the conversation to to preserve those games for future generations and just your own personal nostalgia for titles that you want to go back to. So I'm hopeful with this particular story that it is not too big of a issue for Nintendo Switch games going forward, and that online system check, as long as that piece is missing and it really doesn't hurt the performance of Nintendo Switch titles going forward in a noticeable way, I think we will be okay with this one ultimately, but it's still going to be one we have to keep our eyes on as Nintendo Switch fans. But I want to hear from you guys at this point in the video, all your thoughts around this particular story. Do you think it could be a bigger problem for Switch games than we realize right now, and that Nintendo may indeed sacrifice things like smooth, consistent frame rates for things like anti-piracy checks and online checks for these games to be able to run? Or do you think Nintendo will be smart with this move and not let it affect gameplay performance whatsoever if they do implement the technology for major titles going forward? And bonus question, share with me whether or not you're a fan of emulation and game preservation, as long as you own the games, or if you're somebody who's just anti the whole thing, because I've definitely seen comments from that too. I definitely think there's a right way to do emulation and I'm a fan of it, but I want to hear from you guys regardless of your thoughts and feelings on everything we talked about today. I look forward to hearing from you all in the comments down below before you leave the video, as I do look forward to getting a back and forth conversation started with you all around these topics. Go watch yesterday's video next if you haven't already, where we do a brief walkthrough of Gamescom 2022 and highlight the very hyped Sonic Frontiers trailer that was at that event, as well as the interesting Treehouse presentation that was officially confirmed for this week from Nintendo. Also, make sure you like, subscribe, turn on your notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.